hard and we get through the fire. Got the edge and we're taking it higher. Yes, reaching for the ages, and we got it all. We have power.
Welcome back to Made for More. I am your host, Holly J. Moore. Today's episode is just a little bit different. I don't know if you know this, but my day job is as a lawyer. I am a divorce and custody lawyer. We do family law. I have a law firm, More Family Law Group. And every now and again, I just like to riff on some legal stuff. One could say it's my opportunity to get more legal. Today, I want to talk about California being a 50-50 state. When I peruse the internets, I always see people talking about, California, everything's just 50-50. You don't need a lawyer. It's just 50. It's a 50-50 split, like easy peasy, lemon squeezy, no big thing. So is California truly a 50-50 state when it comes to support, when it comes to property division, when it comes to anything? And I would say if you have the scenario where you or your spouse made absolutely zero money prior to getting married, you did not have a career, you did not acquire a single car, home, retirement account, couch, or anything like that, and you received no financial help from any family members, and then you got married with this absolutely clean financial slate, and then when you were married, everything remained super clean, where there was no financial help from anybody's family. There were no what I call nuances. Maybe that's a 50-50 split. But do you know how often that happens? It's very rare, especially nowadays where people are getting married a little bit later. Generally, they are already in their career. They already have retirement accounts through their employer. Oftentimes, they've already bought a house. They certainly have cars. In many occasions, they've had financial help from family members. And in all of those cases, it is not a 50-50 split. In fact, right here, I have basically 8 pages of exceptions to a 50-50 split. And just to give you guys an idea of the nuances that could make something not be a clean 50-50 split, we're talking about where people maybe used separate property money to pay on a community property asset. We're talking about where there was community property used to pay a premarital debt for one of the spouses. We're talking about when one spouse had intentional wrongful separate conduct. We're also talking about when spouse one uses separate property to pay community property. Okay, you get the point. Like, this is all just legal mumbo jumbo that I know you guys are glossing over by now. And that's okay. The point is to really show you and highlight the fact that California law is definitely not cut and dry. Everything's just 50-50. The people that are saying that either are trying to intentionally mislead you for some other ulterior motive, or they just have no idea what they're talking about. So let's just take the scenario that comes up most often that really upsets people when they are faced with it in a divorce is this issue of a house. So let me just take you through this scenario. Let's just say man owns a house before he was married. He already has a job. He already has an income. He purchases a home. He is a completely single man. He purchases the home with his income and earnings from his job, and he owns that home for, however long. And then eventually it could be 10 months, it could be 10 years, it could be 30 years, it could be 1 month, doesn't matter. And then he gets married. And he continues to pay the mortgage as he always has. And let's just say in this scenario, because this tends to be the most upsetting and confusing for people, let's just say in this scenario, he marries a woman who does not work. She has no income and earnings of her own. Maybe they decided she was going to be a stay-at-home wife if they don't have any kids, or a stay-at-home mom. Whatever the case may be, maybe she cannot work because of disability, or maybe she chooses not to work, but she has no income or earnings available to her. So husband continues to pay the mortgage, as he always has, on the house that he purchased prior to them getting married. And he always thinks of this house as his house, his own house, his separate property house. He bought it before they were married, maybe before they even met. He paid the mortgage with his own money before they were married. He paid with his own money after they were married, or during the marriage. He paid with his own money after maybe they separated. He thinks of it as his own house. And he's like, she's not getting anything from this house. Au contraire, mon frère. If you don't speak French, that means on the contrary, my brother. Because what happens in that, the way California law is set up, is that the community, and when I use the term the community or community property, that means two people together. So once you get married, you create the community. So the community, by virtue of just him being married, because in California, your income and earnings during marriage they belong to everybody. They belong to you and your spouse. Even if your spouse doesn't make any money, even if your spouse doesn't work, even if your spouse doesn't want them to belong to her or him, community property law says that once you're married, earnings belong to everyone. So they get married. The community then acquires an interest by virtue of him paying those mortgage payments with his income and earnings during the marriage. And so when they go to divorce, if he wants to keep that house, he is going to owe her a lot of money from that house. And that just is so mind-blowing and so infuriating for so many people, because for all that time, they thought of that house as their own. And they know that they bought it before the marriage, and they know they paid for it the whole time. And it seems very unfair at the time. But that is California community property law. So that is literally one of 8 pages of nuance of how all this can work. This same principle applies to retirement accounts. This same principle applies to some debts. Same principle applies to any other types of assets that you might have going on. Cars, investment accounts, investment properties, things like that. So it's very nuanced. Now, a lot of people who feel that this is very unfair and they just can't believe it, and how could it be this way? Why is it this way? All that kind of stuff. I'm moving out of California. There is a better way. And I don't mean to derail this particular episode of Sidebar, because the topic for today is California really a 50-50 state? But if you don't like these rules, there is a way to play by your own rules. I am always a huge fan of just taking my fate and my destiny into my own hands. I don't really like to be told what to do. That's why I own a business. Instead of working for an employer, I would be fired, because I don't like to be told what to do. So the way to deviate from these rules is from a prenup or a postnup if you're already married. That's the way to sort of create your own set of rules, and that is the way to avoid these sort of nuances where something that you thought was your own that isn't subject to the 50-50 rule is now subject to, to different rules, and you're going to have to pay out from an asset that you thought was yours and yours alone. It's also a way to deviate if you don't want everything to be 50-50. Maybe you feel like you're the breadwinner of the family, you have made sacrifices, you're making all the money, you're providing for the family, the other spouse isn't pulling their weight that you maybe want them to. It's another way to deviate from everything being 50-50. But back to the main topic, California law, when you divorce, is very nuanced. It's very, very rarely a 50-50 split. It's certainly not that with child support or spousal support. It's certainly not a guarantee that it's that with custody and visitation. And it's absolutely not that with property division. So if you're completely glossed over and you're like, this is boring as all heck, I agree, but that's why you need a lawyer if you're facing a divorce. On the surface, a lot of this stuff appears a lot easier and more simple than it actually is. me being a family law attorney, I'm a certified family law specialist. I've been literally doing this for almost 2 decades as a licensed attorney, but 5 years prior to that. And every day, the more I learn about all the nuances and complexities of California law, I myself recognize that there's still a lot that I don't know. And there's still, I have to look up case law, and I have to really dive into the statutes and the laws and the nuances in California community property law. So if you're facing a divorce, don't do it alone, particularly if you have assets. You definitely need an experienced attorney, and don't fall for it. California is not just 50-50. See you on the next one. A prenuptial agreement, or sometimes called a premarital agreement, is an agreement that 2 parties enter into before they get married that basically chooses to deviate from state law. It assigns rights and responsibilities regarding assets and debts that are acquired during the marriage. Some common misconceptions about prenups are, 1, that they basically doom the marriage to failure, or that it's really planning to divorce, and neither of those things are true. But the real value of a prenup is talking about and creating rules around how the things that you acquire during the marriage are going to be characterized. A prenup can protect things like art collections, real estate portfolios, businesses, all those types of assets. The ideal timeline to get a prenup is not 2 weeks before the wedding. The final version of a prenup has to be presented to the parties 7 days before they actually sign it. So there's like a 7-day waiting period. As soon as you get engaged, you should seek a lawyer's advice and counsel on a prenup and start the process then, because the closer the prenup is signed to the wedding, the more likely that the court is going to think there was some sort of duress involved in that person signing it, and they have to prove that the prenup was signed voluntarily in order for them to be enforced. At More Family Law Group, we represent a lot of high-profile people, celebrities, professional athletes, business tycoons. If you already have a lot of assets, or you think you're going to be acquiring a lot of assets during your marriage, we are the best ones to protect that for you and help you make your marriage stronger. Call More Family Law Group today.